Hello everyone and welcome to this video of analyzing Tokyo Ghoul. I don't want to eat up most of your time, but I've been seeing a lot of people just sharing comments and thanking me for making these videos, and I want to reciprocate that gratitude for those who watch the videos in the first place. They do way better than I was expecting them to ever do, and it's nice to see that so many people enjoyed this series as much as I do. So again, thank you guys for all the support, it means the world. And with that being said, let's dive into Haise Sasaki. In this video specifically, I'll be breaking down his character and his relationship with Arima Kishou. Haise is a rank 1 investigator and the third personality of Kaneki Ken. This personality was created upon Kaneki's defeat at the hands of Arima in the ending of the original Tokyo Ghoul. Arima had captured Kaneki and held him prisoner at Kokle. Kaneki at this time was just mentally lost and unstable, and Arima had done so much damage to him, combined with the shock from being unable to save anybody, he fell deep into madness, and did nothing but ramble on about saving everybody, meanwhile refusing to eat. To solve this issue, Arima enters Kaneki's cell in Kokle, and decides to destroy what's left of him by telling him that he's killed every single person that he loves. This information pushes Kaneki all the way to the depths of madness and causes him to break. After some time passes, it's seen that Kaneki was able to repress all of these memories due to the shock from Arima telling him that everybody was dead, meanwhile already being a broken mess. Arima drops a book off at his cell, saying that he'll leave more for him if one isn't enough. Kaneki begins to rehabilitate himself through reading, and although his memories are gone, his sanity returns. Arima eventually comes back once more and states that Kaneki needs to give himself a name. After some back and forth, he decides on Haise Sasaki, and after this, he was appointed as an investigator. And this is how Kaneki became Haise after the events of Tokyo Ghoul. Due to Arima raising Haise as his protege, he comes out very good-willed, driven, and competent. And although Haise was able to gain these traits from being under Arima for an extended amount of time, some of his traits from his previous personalities remain, such as Kaneki's lack of assertiveness and his finger cracking. But two of his traits that remain that stand out even more is first that he genuinely values working with others as Haise. One of Kaneki's biggest flaws was the belief that he had to take on everything alone in order to shield everybody from danger, but Haise does not agree with that. And Haise actually believes that his team should rely on one another. The second standout trait that Haise has, noted from Arima himself, is that Haise has an extreme yearning for a maternal figure. This being a constant through all of Kaneki's personalities. And you can kind of see this through Haise because he tends to refer to Akira as mom out of the blue. Another key part of Haise's character I want to go over before we get into Arima is the mental construct of Kaneki. Although at first he's only aware of it as his ghoul side and chooses not to acknowledge it in fear that if he begins to understand this ghoul side of himself, he will no longer have a place at home or the CCG. But as the story goes on and it builds up to Kaneki's return, Haise learns more and more about it through other characters and builds a better relationship with it, despite knowing that this relationship cannot last forever. This mental construct plays a similar role to Haise that Rize once did for Kaneki himself. To sum it up, Haise here seems to be a combination of the two previous personalities, meanwhile being nurtured by the environment he's currently in alongside Arima. I do believe that this is why Haise's hair is designed to be a mix of black and white, because at this point, we will only know the previous two personalities as black hair Kaneki and white hair Kaneki. Haise's primary struggle in this story is not dealing with the world around him, no big bad ghouls or investigators, but it lies within himself. This struggle being one to find out who he is, to understand who he is, and to find out where he truly belongs as a person. Do you know the fear of waking up, not knowing anything? The fear of only having what you've been told to cling to? What it's like not even knowing who your real parents are? This quote here does a great job at explaining Haise's overarching struggle, if I couldn't do it well enough. And this eventually comes to a climax when Haise runs into a problem that only Kaneki can solve. And this is a struggle that Arima is aware of, and even attempts to accommodate throughout the story. Haise and Arima have a very strong parent-child relationship after the events of Haise's rehabilitation. This is due to Arima being the first and only person he knew and spoke to for an extended amount of time once he became sane. And since he had no memories of anything prior, Arima was again all Haise knew. I do want to say that Arima most likely cared for Haise from the very beginning. If Arima choosing to leave Kaneki alive wasn't enough confirmation to believe that he saw something in Kaneki from the very beginning, him leaving that book shows that he was genuinely interested in Kaneki as a person. Since Kaneki was reciting poems from books in order to cope with the pain that Arima initially was inflicting onto him when they first fought, using what we know, I'm sure that Arima did give Kaneki many books because this was the only coping mechanism that he saw from Kaneki. So in a way, he was trying to help Kaneki here. Arima genuinely cared for Kaneki as a father from the beginning. And although his methods of helping Kaneki at the start are very questionable, you've always got to remember that Arima came from the brutal and sociopathic background of the Sunlit Garden, and was raised as no more than a killing machine for the CCG. So with that in mind, I think he did a very good job with all he knew. We're not sure of what happened between Haise becoming an investigator and the Haise we see at chapter 1, but it's shown a couple of times that Arima has had to advise or lecture Haise constantly in all sorts of ways, whether that be for work-related things or things related to Haise's emotions. But it does seem as if Haise does come to Arima to open up to him. So I'm sure that Arima has done a very good job in advising Haise, and has at least earned his trust. I do also want to take this opportunity to say that Arima more than likely has attempted to improve his methods of teaching or connecting with Haise as well. As before Haise went under Akira's mentorship, he was aware of Kaneki's extreme yearning for a mother, and then in chapter 8, when Haise refers to Arima as his father, he says that he's kidding. But Arima doesn't shoot this down. In fact, he goes along with it and takes it even a step further himself by stating that the group that Haise mentors must be his grandchildren. Arima then says, "Let's clean up the room so nobody knows we were sparring in here," which shows that Arima also keeps secrets with Haise. And although this is very little and I could be overanalyzing this is Arima Kishou. He can essentially do anything he wants, and he has no reason to hold any secrets when it comes to anything below the severity of the organization B. Arima choosing to keep any secrets between him and Haise when it genuinely doesn't matter signifies a form of trust between the two. There are many gems in this chapter, such as Arima defending and justifying Haise's screw up despite it being quite serious, or him asking Haise if he's heard the mental construct of Kaneki trying to speak to him once again. There's just a lot of trust from Arima to Haise, and their relationship is very strong for what it is. As Haise's story is brought to its climax against Kanae, he suffers so much damage in his battle against her that he begins to hallucinate Arima. This false Arima saying to Haise, "You must, Haise. Do your job. Kill just as I do. You are my weapon. Unless, Haise, would you like to die again?" This is the memory that comes right before the mental breakdown that firstly revealed Kaneki's abuse from his mother as a child. And I believe that once Haise unlocked this memory of Arima's training early in the relationship, the memory that he had blocked for the sake of believing that Arima was his holier-than-thou parent, he's also reminded of his mother, as this was the same exact reason he had blocked the memories of her as well. I don't mean to vilify Arima by pointing this out, as Arima did save the entire world with his initial cruel treatment of Haise. This could be seen as Haise misinterpreting his training with Arima, as being hit by his parent would likely cause his mind to perceive things in this way due to his previous life experience. Whether or not Haise actually has his memories, the way that this story seems to handle the usage of memories is that they tend to remain subconsciously within our protagonist, whether or not they actually remember it in the moment. With all that said, I doubt it, as Arima did say some very cruel things to Haise in this blocked memory as well. But crazily enough, I think this is something else that displays Arima caring for Haise as time went on. He first refers to Haise as a tool that must do his job, treating him like trash in this blocked memory before the events of Re. But Arima does not speak to Haise in such a way when we see them in the present story, not even when Arima has to keep up appearances as a stoic reaper. It could also be argued that this memory was just simply false and Haise hallucinated every single part of it, not just the manifestation of Arima alone. And I wouldn't say that this was the case either, as Haise begins to doubt if Arima truly cares for him and constantly wonders what Arima thinks of him all the way up to the climax of their battle in the detention center. I believe that this is the purpose of Haise's memories of rehabilitation being shown before they fight, as this was something Haise was heavily struggling with at the time. He's struggling to understand Arima, and what Arima sees him as. When the two do fight, Haise points out that Arima started off their fight by attacking him with no hesitation. And at first this can be interpreted as Arima being ruthless with Haise, but to Arima, this fight was no more than a high-stakes sparring match. He never intended to off Haise here, so it makes sense that he'd attack with no hesitation. They've sparred many times, so what's the difference here? It's understandable that Haise misunderstands this though, as this isn't a sparring match to him and Arima has scolded him for showing hesitation when on the job in a flashback. Interestingly enough, when their battle actually does begin, the first thing we see is the same flashback of Arima lecturing Haise for speaking to ghouls and telling him that he shouldn't under any circumstances. And ironically, the same chapter ends with Arima speaking to Haise, telling him to stop messing around. This shows Arima contradicting himself. As their battle continues, it's essentially Arima attempting to part one last lesson through sparring, and the most important of all, that Haise truly needs to realize before he goes. This lesson is to stop protecting others before protecting yourself, as Arima blatantly tells Haise straight up that if you can't stop me here, I will hunt down and end everybody you love. He forces Haise to understand how important his life truly is. That Haise can't protect anybody if he doesn't keep himself around to protect them in the first place. One-time sacrifices won't accomplish anything but prolong the death of the weak. I have to say that if Arima never took the time to understand Haise emotionally from the very beginning, then he would have never understood why Haise was making the decision to constantly do this in the first place, and thus would have never taken action towards eliminating this flaw that Haise has. As Haise does in fact learn this lesson, which warrants a smile that Arima couldn't help but display, they begin to fight once more. Haise destroys Arima's weapon, and Arima submits at that point, inflicting a fatal wound on himself. He tells Haise many things, but most importantly, that Haise was not the only one who entered this battle with a purpose that transcends himself. As Arima was a child who was born and treated as an experiment, forced to be no more than a pawn, and created a secret plan to destroy the system he represented, no one was more fit to be Arima's child than Kaneki Ken. Arima leaves the world happier than ever, happy that he was finally able to leave something behind. And if Arima's kindness was still doubted at this point, Ishida displays Arima holding a butterfly and setting it free instead of crushing it in his hand, a metaphor for Arima's true nature and a bleak communication of how miserable he must have been as the Reaper. Haise understands this and realizes in the end that Arima did love him after all. Although Haise had a hard time understanding him, who doesn't have a hard time understanding their parents? I want to conclude that Arima had questionable methods of raising Haise at first, but he didn't know any better. And also, he certainly improved as a mentor and a parent as time went on. Due to circumstances though, with the world and Haise's life at stake, he had to go to extremes, so I completely understand. Strength was a huge factor in preserving Arima's life, and his strength has protected him so many times over. So maybe forcing Haise to become stronger was his way of keeping Haise safe when he was not present. Who really knows? As Arima was rarely seen, let alone dived into as a character, a lot of the thinking process behind his actions are left up to interpretation. And knowing Ishida, this was on purpose. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up here. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if you did, thank you so much for watching all the way through, and consider subscribing so you don't miss any more of these. With that being said, have a great day, guys. Peace.